Hey, welcome to Coding in Public. My name is Chris, and today, actually over the next few videos here, we are going to be building out this Tech Gear page. And you'll notice it's got a navigation up top, it's got these little buttons on the side, and if you click any of these, it'll jump right to it. Again, you can click these upper ones, and then additionally, you can use your keyboard arrows, and as you move down, it'll move down with you, up, it'll move up with you. So we're actually going to build this totally from scratch with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Well, I guess Sass and JavaScript. All right, let's jump right in. All right, I've done a video on Parcel before, and you'll see I've got this directory set up using Parcel. So I've got my Sass linked directly in my index.html page. I've got a JavaScript file that has exactly nothing in it really right now, and then just a bare bones Sass file here. I've got images, and all of this lives in a source folder. Parcel then watches it and dumps everything in this distribution folder here. And that's what's showing up over on this side. So today we're going to work on the HTML, and if we happen to get past this markup, we might start working on the Sass as well. Okay, so we've got a few things we need to worry about. We've got this navigation area, we've got these buttons, and then we've got each of these sections that we're trying to build out. And you can see as I scroll here, we've got 4 sections here with just different items that are our gear. So inside this body tag here, I do have a main tag, which is where we're going to put our sections. But let's go ahead and build our navigation out up here. So we'll use a navigation tag here, and let's go ahead and make this an H1. As a general rule, you should only have one H1 per page. You don't have to necessarily style it as an H1, but it's kind of the main thing your whole page is about. So we'll do this, and inside here, we're going to have a link tag, and we'll say my tech gear. Something like that. Now, I guess for this link tag, we're going to need some kind of link, and we just want it to go to the current directory. That's our home page link, in other words. And if we refresh this, it should show up. There it is, my tech gear. So we're going to do UL, and inside that UL, we will have 4 LIs, and inside each of those, we're going to have one link tag here. And let's go ahead and call this something. Let's give it a class like nav links. All right, let's flesh this out. Okay, now in a moment, we're going to actually use not just this reference here, we're going to actually use something we're just going to call a data section. So you can add your own attributes to anything here. You just always want to any markup, you just have to prefix it with data dash. So we can name this whatever we want. I'm going to name it data section. And then this data section is basically going to be this camera, this watch, computer, and drone. And we're going to use the same kind of data attributes for those side navigations here. And we'll be able to select which section we're in based on this data section. So that's why I'm doing it that way. Okay, so we've got our main navigation built out. I don't think we're going to need anything else there. So let's come down to the main tag. And you want to put all your main content in the main tag. And we're going to have 4 section areas, tags, and each of these will have an ID relating to whatever it is. So this first one would have an ID of camera. And let's see, what do we want in that? So we could do the background image in a bunch of different ways. We could just apply it directly to this ID camera. I think I'm just going to actually use image tags and then make them like position absolute and fill the whole area, something like that. So let's come in here and we're going to say we need this image tag, and it is in our images folder, and it's our camera. Okay. And then we'll add camera here. And I am going to go ahead and add a class to this. So I'll come in here and say section background, something like that. Okay, then we've got the section content. That's what's going to be in the middle of each of the sections. If you remember, it's this area here. So I'm just going to wrap it all in a div, and let's call it section content. Okay, and in here we'll have an H2. So we'll call this section content description. And we'll say my camera gear. And then below this, we'll add since it's a link out to another page, we'll go ahead and add it as an actual link. And normally it would go somewhere. Right now, I'm just going to have it do nothing. And we'll say learn more. And once again, let's add a class. Let's call this section content button, something like that. Okay, and I think that's all we've got to do here. Let's go ahead and just copy this down now, and I'm holding Option and Shift on Mac. Okay, so those are the sections. We've got most of the HTML actually already built out. So I think for the sake of this video not being the shortest, most useless video, let's go ahead and start working on some Sass. So we're going to start styling this. And you'll see I've got just a basic kind of reset, so getting rid of all margin padding, setting everything to border box. I've imported a Google font. I've added a couple of colors we're going to use, and then I've added that color as kind of my primary color for all my text. Because all the text in here is uppercase, I went ahead and just uppercase the whole body, and then I have scroll behavior smooth on. And I'll show you what this does. This media prefers reduced motion once we get everything set up. But for now, let's go ahead and come down below here. So let's go ahead and pull this back up. And I guess the one thing we didn't yet add is those little buttons on the side. So we'll add those in a moment here. So let's go ahead and grab our nav bar, and we'll just say position fixed. So it'll always stay on the top of the page there. You see automatically it kind of pulls out of the flow of the document. And we'll say Z index. We want it to be above everything else. We'll just say something ridiculous like 100. And then left 0 and right 0. That'll stretch it the full width. Okay, we'll say display flex and justify content space between. This will spread it to the outsides here, these two sections. You've got this section and this section. That's what we want. And then let's come in here and say align item center. Let's go ahead and throw a background color here just so you can see what's going on. We'll say red. Okay, so that's our area here, and it's floating on top of everything else because we've got this position fixed here. Okay, we're going to come in here and we're going to say, all right, inside here we want to grab all of our, let's go ahead and grab this class nav links. Since this is just a link here, I'm going to do the same thing here, except I'm going to add here like, let's see, nav links home as well. All right, what that allows us to do is to say all of our nav links, and what we're going to do is grab nav links, and then this Sass allows us to say anything that's active, anything that's a link, anything that is visited, and let's just actually just grab the link and the visited, and then we'll say color is set to that variable light. Let's say up here text decoration set to none. That'll get rid of our underline on each of those. Before we do too much, let's go ahead and grab that UL, which I should probably call something. Let's say class is nav link container. And I'll come in here and grab that instead. And we'll say display flex. And list style is none. All right, let's save this too. And you see they stack up all that way right for us. Let's also come in here and add some padding. So we'll say padding is like 1 rem. Let's also come in here and let's see, let's add a font size to this. So let's say font size is 1.3 rem, something like that. All right, so it's already getting a little bit bigger. Okay, now on hover, we want there to be a border. And so let's go ahead and add a border without hover so we can transition between them. So we'll say border bottom, 3 pixels solid, and we'll do light as well. And then let's add a transition of, we'll just do all for 250 milliseconds, ease in and out. Okay, if we want to, maybe let's come up and make this a variable as well. Functional variables. I don't know, something. And we will call this transition all. Okay, and then let's use this variable down below so we can use that later as we need it. Okay, and now let's come down here and grab all of our hover states, our active, our hover, and our focus is what we want. And we'll say border bottom 3 pixels solid. Now here's something cool you can do with Sass natively. We could say RGBA light, comma, like 0.6. which normally you'd have to actually use RGBA, but it'll just convert that for you. So if we come in here and hover over these things, you'll see that they show up this way. Now, this one we don't want light, we want this to be transparent. All right, and so when we come up and hover over them, now we'll get this little drop-down effect going on. That padding is a little intense, so let's say 1 rem, and then at the bottom we'll say 0.5 rem. There we go. Something a little bit better like that. Now what we're going to do is we've got that active link state, but let's actually add an active class. And for this one, we're going to do the same thing, except we are going to full light. So when we hover, it'll just kind of prompt us, but when it actually switches, we'll have it be a hard, the same color as that text, like a hard light there. Okay, I think that's mostly there. Let's add a little bit of letter spacing, like 2 pixels, something like that. Space it out just a touch. 1 pixel. Okay, perfect. So we've got that set up. Let's see, the other thing we'll do here is set up our nav links home. And this allows us to basically style this a little bit differently. So we'll keep all that the same, but let's just come down here and say if it also has this nav links home, then we want the font size to be 2 rem. And that should make it bigger. 2.5, 2.6, something like that. Okay. Last thing, let's come in here and say padding of like 1 rem all the way around. A little bit bigger. Okay, now remember we're not going to have this background color on, so we should be set there. Okay, so as we work on this, that's kind of what we're going for there. I wouldn't mind that being just a touch bigger too. There we go. Okay, 3 rem. Now we've got each of these sections here, and they've got all this stuff in it. Now right now they're just stacked because that's how we have our index.html page, where we've got our image, then we've got this stuff, and then the text, and then the button below. So let's go ahead and let's just grab everything we need, and then we can close down that index.html page so we're not looking at it constantly and clouding our view here. So we're going to grab all of our section tags. So you will need that. Section background, that's our image. And then let's go ahead and grab let's see, I guess we don't really need to do anything with the section content, but we will with this description. So let's grab that. And then we will need our button. Okay, so I think we should be able to do everything with that. Let's go ahead and just drop this back behind the rest of this so that we've got a little more room. So these sections here, we're going to want to make them full screen. So we're going to say width, 100 view width, and height, 100 view height. So the section should take up the whole area. And then we will say display grid and place items center. This will put everything in the middle of that section. Now we're going to position that background as an absolute. So we're going to come in here and say position relative so that the background stays in connection with the section. Now we'll say position absolute. And I'm actually going to just do a shortcut I have to pop in a full absolute every way. And we'll say width of 100% and height of 100%. And that will fit the exact area. But you'll notice it's kind of stretched and squashed. So when you have a width and a height of 100%, but that doesn't fit the image, when it's an image like this and not a background image, you can do object fit in cover. That's like background size, I think. Same kind of thing, except for freestanding images. So now you see it's taking up the full width and height, and that's perfect. Now it is position absolute. Let's go ahead and move this back so that our text shows up over the top. And we're mostly there. Let's just come in here and grab the actual text. And we'll say font size, let's do like 4 rem, something like that for that. And then color, you guessed it, that light. We'll say text align center. And I think that's all we need to do. And now let's come in here to this button below. And for the button, this is a link. First of all, right now, when we come over here, we do get this little cursor, but you can see we've got an underline. We don't really want that, so let's say text decoration of none. Remove the underline. Say font size. Let's do 2 rem, something like that. And then we'll say, let's make this a display inline block. This will allow us to apply margin to it and things like that. And then let's come in here and say margin The top should be 2rem, the middle or side to side should be auto, so it'll float. And then let's add, I guess we don't really need anything on the bottom, so let's just leave it alone and see what it does there. And let's see, to get that in the middle, well, actually we will need that section content. And we can grab that and then set a text line center on it. And that will bring that in the middle, and we can get rid of this content description 1 too, because everything in there will be text align center. Let's come back here and let's see, let's go ahead. We're going to put some kind of scale effect on this. If you see here, when we come over this, it kind of scales up. So in order to get that transition to work, we're going to have to put a scale on the non-transitioned element as well. So we'll say scale 1, which is exactly nothing, and then transition of transition, all. And that's that variable we created earlier. Now let's come down here and we're going to say when it's link or visited, we'll say color of light. And then down here, when we are hovering, when it's active, or when it's focused, we will say transform scale, and let's do like 1.02, something like that. So we come over here, pull over here, and there we go. It kind of scales up. Now we did have a background on that. See, background color, and once again we're going to do RGBA, and we'll do our primary this time, point like 3. I'm trying to remember, do we have a dark background on that? That look right? I guess we had a white background. So let's come in here and say light. We can do whatever we want. So let's do this and then say padding of like 1 rem and 2 rem, something like that. I don't know that I love that. Let's come up here and see what these look like. Okay, so those look cool. So we might need to do here is actually turn this text dark just for these two, because the other, all this looks great. So let's come back in here, and on these buttons, let's add another class. So on both of these, I'm going to say section content button dark. And then what we can do is we can come in here and say, if it also includes dark, then we'll grab this and we'll say the color should be primary. I don't think I saved that index.html page. Okay, there we go. So that looks a little bit better. It's filling in nicely there. I bet if we pull this out, it'll kind of zoom in. Yeah. So probably for mobile, we could figure out something that would work a little bit better for that image. But for now, I think that works pretty well. Now, we don't actually need this additional section here because the hover and all that is the exact same. But let's get that properly indented. Okay, so now we've got everything set up for us. Let's zoom out just a little bit more, trying to make it to where we can view it. I'm mainly working on desktop. The only thing you'd really have to change for mobile is this header area. You'd have to figure out something a little different for it. Okay, the last thing we need to do is style those buttons on the side. All right, so let's come back to our HTML page, and we're going to add, let's add it up here kind of in the navigation area. And we're going to have a div, and let's just call this navigation or nav button container. That will be kind of an area that covers the whole page and is fixed. So inside that, we're going to have a nav button grid, we'll call it. And then inside of this, we'll have nav buttons. And we'll have, let's see, 4 of those. There we go. Now these don't have to have anything in them because they're not, related to anything. We're not going to have anything except for just kind of styled colors and stuff. What we do want inside of these is these data sections. So this data section here, we want to correspond to this camera one. Now right now, nothing much is going to happen because it doesn't have any content, but that is what we'll do over this way. Let's go back up and let's see, before the nav, since it's at the beginning here, let's go ahead and say nav button container. That's our kind of whole wrapper that goes around the whole thing. We're going to say position, and we want that to be fixed. And we'll say top 0, bottom 0, left or right and left of 0. And then we want this to be above everything, like 110, something like that. Okay, now if we do that, the thing is we've just now lost the ability to click on anything below here. So we need to actually put pointer events of none. And now when we come back here, we can hover once again over all that stuff. So that's good. Let's now add that button grid. So we'll say nav button grid, I think is what that was. And here's where those 5 kind of areas are held. Let's go ahead and add a background color just so you can see this. And we'll do red at 40% opacity. And there it is. So now we know where that's at. This nav button grid is the thing that holds those little dots over here on the side. We want to position that halfway up this container, and it always will stay there. As you can see, because we made that fixed, this nav button container fixed, it's always over the entire screen. So we can position this now relative to that. So we'll say position absolute, and we'll say right. We want it to be right, like, I don't know, 1 rem, something like that. So like 16 pixels off the right, and a top at 50%. Now, let's see, this is kind of hard because you can't see anything. Let's style these dots first. So we'll say nav buttons, I think it was just nav button maybe. And we'll say width of like 20 pixels, height of 20 pixels, background, or let's do background color of transparent. So the kind of the middles of those circles will be blank. And we'll do a border of 3 pixels solid of our light. And now you see they show up right over this way, just so you can see what those look like. And we'll say border radius 100%. All right, there's circles. Okay, now let's come back up to here now that we've got this set here. And you may notice it's kind of hard to see here. Let me zoom back in to where it's supposed to be. It's not quite in the center. You see how it's actually, this is the center up here? That's because when you set it 50% top, it's the top of these divs that will be exactly in the center. So if we want this whole grid to be in the middle, we actually need to transform this up, and we'll do translate y negative 50% of its own height. And you see that bumps it up to the exact middle. Then let's go ahead and do display of grid here. And if we do grid, it's not going to change anything, but it allows us to add a grid gap. And we'll do like 0.5 rem, something like that, 0.8 rem, yeah, whatever we want. Now we do want to click on these. We'll say cursor pointer, so that when we come over here, click on these things, it should show, but we turn pointer events none for the whole area. So we actually need to come back, and on these buttons, oh, and I added the cursor pointer to the wrong area too. So we want these to be on the buttons. And now we'll come here, and that should allow us, oh, I forgot to change this to all. It should allow us now to come in here, yeah, and click on these things here. Okay, now we want to fill each of those buttons when they're active with that little circle. So let's do this. Let's say, let's add it as an after element. And so we need content. It can be nothing, that's totally fine. And we're going to do position absolute, which means we need these to be a position of relative, so that our after element stays in relationship to the button. We'll say top 0, right 0. All right, and now let's say margin of 3 pixels, so it stays kind of in the middle, and a background color. And just for art, just so you can see it here, we'll say light, and you can see they show up there. We need the same border radius to match what's up top. So now there's circles. Okay, that's perfect. Now what we want to do is let's go ahead and actually make this transparent. We will do a transition, and it'll be that same transition all. Oh, everything kind of shares the exact same transition. And then we only want to activate that. Let's do it kind of in 2 different ways. So we're going to say if we're hovering, or and it has that after, or if we are focused. Then we want a background color. We'll do, again, RGBA, light 0.5, 0.7, something like that. So now if we come in here and we hover Let's see, we're not getting anything. Hover. Hover, and then inside here, we'll do, and it has an active, or after. And that's where we will change this background color. Let's try that again. There we go. So it's showing up here when I hover over them. And actually, let's just keep that on hover. And we'll move focus down below here. Then what we'll say is on focus, or when it has a class of active, which we'll add with JavaScript. So when it's the active area is what we'll eventually do. Then that's when we want the after element to now have a background color just of that full white. Okay, so now if I come back in here and let's actually add a class of active to this. I hit tab. Oh, and I need to add a ampersand here. Okay, so now I come back over here. There you go, and you see it came on. And if I remove it, you'll see it fades off. So that's what we want to happen whenever it's the active area. Now, the last thing we should do is get rid of this hideous red. And that way we don't have to worry about that sitting over the top of everything. We'll zoom this area back out. So this is eventually what it'll look like, kind of full screen here. As we move sections, what we want to do now with JavaScript is update which thing is active or underlined here, and then which items are active over this way. As you can see, we've got this hover set up to where when we hover over these things, they will demonstrate that you can click on them, but it's not until we click and make it active that we want it to actually hold that color there. And again, we'll do that with our JavaScript. Now, there may be a couple things that I forgot that we'll need to do as we move in, but I see we've got our active class on here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to tie up this video. Next video is when we'll actually add all the JavaScript and get this to work just like we want it to. But hopefully this was helpful. I haven't really done a whole lot of HTML and CSS on the channel because I'm mostly focusing on JavaScript myself. But hopefully some of this was helpful for you as we set it up. All right, thanks for watching and happy coding. I will see you for part 2 next time.